Welcome to this live section, ladies and gentlemen. Um, President Trump paused a White House meeting with European leaders just to make a phone call with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. And I'm not just talking about low level delegations from Europe, I'm talking about Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, Keir Starmer, Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission President, the NATO Secretary General, like this, the best of the best, the cream de la cream of European leaders, were in the White House waiting for President Trump. They started the meeting and he put it on pause to make a phone call with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Welcome to this live stream, ladies and gentlemen. This is a segue to the conversation. Today's conversation is going to be about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and there's a lot of development that have happened over the past 48 hours. In fact, over the past week, the build up to the Alaska event, President Trump excited to see his buddy, President Putin, and then rolling the red carpet and then flying these B2 bombers, about 5 or 10 of them, for whatever reason, I have no idea. And then you have the journalist heckling and President Putin putting his hands in the ears and copying and asking, "What the hell are you guys saying?" He's not used to that kind of indiscipline, if you like, and the degenerate level of attitude and behavior of people in Europe and America, claiming lack of decorum. Basically, it's just loud noise, degenerate lifestyle, and all this stuff going on in Europe and in America, and somehow, some way, they think it's democracy, is freedom. When you're free, people are allowed to jump from the building. When you're free, people are allowed to shoot each other. When you're free, so where do you draw the line between freedom and the concept of maximum liberty? Today, we'll be talking about the meeting between President Putin and President Trump last week, Friday, a lead up to the meeting which was held today between President Trump and the European leaders. I'll start by telling you guys that President Putin, President Trump sees himself as an alpha, and at least this is what he thinks in his mind. He's an alpha that he has conservative and you know, traditional values or beliefs. That is how he thinks. And this is somebody that used to be a member of the Republican Party, of the Democratic Party, ran as an independent, and now he's in the Republican Party. And so all of a sudden he became so conservative. Yeah, but he respects power, he respects men and women of timber and caliber. And this is why you guys see that he has no respect for these European leaders, but respects Kim Jong Un of North Korea, which is weird. Respect President Vladimir Putin of Russia. And you see, even when Narendra Modi visited Washington, there was this sense of mutual respect between the two counterparts. But Zelensky comes into the White House and get treated like a child, because Zelensky is from the Western European mindset. This is his belief, total freedom, devoid of the concept of maximum liberty. Scream and shout and fight until nobody's alive. And yeah, but the Russians don't play around, and you can see that clearly. The demeanor, with the behavior, with the value system of the Russians compared to that what you have in England. It's completely different. Completely different, right? Even from, and again, it's the whole cultural system or the lack of it. Eating deep into the fabric of European society, which is also, you know, washing off on American society or vice versa, because these are exactly the same thing. You look at countries like the United States, Australia, New Zealand, United Kingdom, Belgium, France, and Germany. Germany used to be the biggest economy in Europe. What has happened to Germany? The US have been advocating and telling Germany to destroy its economy for a long time, targeting the best German brands like Mercedes, Bavarian Motor Works or BMW, and the best of German, automobiles. They've been targeting them with tariff. They've been putting a lot of like a standard on them what level of emission of CO2 emission can you put in place? What level of this? And they're putting this high standard on German goods that are coming into the US market. But funny enough, America is not doing that to Chinese goods. Why? Because they hate the Europeans. Clearly, this is what it is. If not, what on earth is America doing, going, to every length to try to destroy the European economy? All this idea that Germany must destroy its economy, Germany must not be allowed to continue this march towards industrialization. For more than 10 years, they were suffocating and sabotaging the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And immediately it came on board, what happened? They started the war. And this is not, I mean, Germany wants to survive. The German economy now is in recess. The German economy now is in the state is it, what is the right thing, delirium, or in the state of it's in a shambolic state, unable to recover. Why? Because the Europeans clearly have been advised by the United States of America to do exactly what they're asked to do, to strip down their clothes, go down the line in the market, and be humiliated and spat on. This is what America have instructed European leaders. I mean, clearly you can see the difference. Trump sits in the White House with a bunch of European leaders and treat them with disdain. He's irritated. He doesn't want to talk to them. And these are the allies of the United States, in quotes. He treats them with absolute disdain because he hates weakness, because he hates, there's this apathy it takes towards weakness or any sense of weakness. And this is the weakness you can find in abundance in these European leaders. Why on earth are they listening to the United States? The Second World War happened over 80 years ago. What on earth do these Europeans still want? And when you're begging somebody for money, you have no respect. This is the thing, right? You lose your dignity, lose your respect, because if you take plates to somebody's house and ask them for food the first day, you ask them for food the next day, you ask them for food the next day. Anytime you come, oh, he's coming, they close the door. This is what it is with the Europeans. The system in Europe is rigged, and the people rigging it on their behalf is America. America is carrying Europe on its shoulders with the rigged system that America clearly knows. This is why you see that some leaders in America respect countries around the world that are working hard tooth and nail to survive. I'm not saying that they're not working hard in the US or in Europe, but I'm saying the system itself is rigged from top to bottom, printing money from banks without any sort of backup. Clearly, I don't understand. And you see, and by the way, Trump is a narcissist. I'm not his biggest fan, so to speak. But you see the way the sort of mutual respect between him and people he sees as men and women of timber and caliber. You saw the excitement, you saw the sort of mutual respect between him and President Trump, Putin. And in the same vein, you see how he treats President Macron. Yeah, because Macron is weak. He's a weakling. How on earth do you expect Trump to respect Macron when he's being slapped around in Asia by his wife in a public event? Oh man, these European leaders are flakes. So let's look at some of the updates and what he's saying. So Trump meets Zelensky and European leaders in White House, and the high-stake talks. President Trump has resumed his meeting on Ukraine in a leaders-only format in the Oval Office after gathering earlier with European leaders who joined Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for a high-stake summit on ending the war. So basically, the meeting started between Trump and the European leaders, and he told them to wait for him. He went to call Putin, kept them waiting, abandoned them like they're in shit. Yeah. Uh, Look, we need to pray in this life not to be weak. Weakness is not a virtue. It is not a sign of. It is not. It's a vice in itself. If you want to look at it from the moral standpoint, weakness. Don't allow your enemy to sense weakness and your friend to sense weakness. They sense weakness, they run around over you, they run over you, and they don't stop. You have to be strong, you have to stand tall, Don't show them that you're weak. And this is the cardinal point. This is also very important in life. These leaders traveled from Europe. They were not given the same red carpet. They were not given the same red carpet treatment that Trump gave to Putin, who is supposed to be an adversary of the United States. Putin is supposed to be an adversary of the United States. He gets a red carpet. The European leaders are treated with disdain. They are treated like flakes, abandoned in the cold, forced to walk down the market naked, forced to strip down their clothes and be spat on. This is what the US President Donald Trump have done to these European leaders time and time again. And see the way he treats people like Zelensky, the way he treats people like Macron, because he says they are weak. He doesn't like weakness. And this is Trump that I don't even clearly believe is an alpha. He's just masking it up as if he's an alpha. He's not somebody that I respect so much, by the way. But the European leaders are weak. They are clearly weak. You have the US President Donald Trump respecting the Italian Prime Minister Giorgio Meloni, the female Prime Minister of Italy. She's a lady, Iron Lady of Italy. Gets a lot of respect from Trump, and Macron, who is supposed to be a man, gets treated like a sack of shit. It's kind of interesting how human behavior also, is very relevant in analyzing and the discussion of geopolitics. Of course, it's very important. It's not just about it's behavioralism. This is also a theory in international relations and also in politics. Is the behavioral approach, because the institutions alone do not carry themselves. People run these institutions. So the behavioralist approach is important. The attitude, the psychic of these leaders, the behavior of these individuals, and how that impacts on the institutions that they run. So it's the behavioralist approach, that gives you a clear picture and understanding on how politics work at municipal and international level. This is what international politics is also about. So as you look at municipal politics and you see how the behavior of individual, how the charisma of individual actually get things done. When you have an individual that is weak, it rubs off on the system. If you have an individual that is tough enough, it rubs off on the system. If you have an individual that has too much ego and overdoes it, it also rubs off on the system. So you need the right balance. Biden was a darling of the establishment. Some people feel he's better, and I truly believe that he has more. Some will say he's more humane than Trump. Yeah, but he appeared to be weak, and it rubbed off on the system, if you like. Sometimes Trump's overdo it, and it rubs off on the system, and this is why the alt-right in America have been empowered. Really, his first tenure, he praised the Proud Boys, and so on and so forth. So this is what it's about. This is the whole idea and concept of international politics and even municipal politics, and how the behavioralist approach can be used as a tool of analysis and understanding the attitude and the behavior of these individual actors and how that impacts on the institutions. But let's look at the meeting. Um, the White House official confirmed that Zelensky and European leaders are currently in the Oval Office with Trump. So Trump paused meeting with Zelensky and European leaders to call Putin, sources say. So the US President Donald Trump and the Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke after Trump paused his meeting with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and other European leaders on Monday, a source familiar with the matter told CNN. The source said the Europeans were not present for the conversation. The European official told CNN that Trump paused his negotiations with European leaders and Zelensky in order to call Putin. The news was first reported by German newspaper Bild, who reported the talks with European leaders would continue after the call with Putin in the White House. Interesting, guys. Interesting. Well, well, well. When you are weak, This is what you get when you are weak, you are a flake, when you are a bomb sack. This is how you get treated. The German economy was doing well. At the point, the German economy was the third biggest in the world. Japan was at number two, Germany was at number three. There was even a point that the German economy became bigger than the Japanese economy. And then China overtook these economies. Now, the economy of China is equal to the economy of the whole of the European Union. I'm not just talking about Germany. And I'm talking about 2 decades ago. What has happened to Germany? They're following the European model, this idea of having these regional organizations like the European Union and the supranational national institutions like the models they created within the European Union is affecting. It's also impacting on the economy of Germany. Even though it looks to be strong, the euro is strong, but what are they able to do? Absolutely nothing. And this is the situation that the Germans have found themselves. So the share of the joint chiefs working through potential security guarantees for Ukraine. So they're talking about there's a lot of items on the table that they are discussing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, it's insane. It's insane what is going on. All right, so let's look at what the other media outlets are saying. We're going to look at RT, which is the Russian press, what they're also saying about this. By the way, the where I looked at is from the area of from CNN. We're going to look at other European and American media outlets as well. So this is from the Russian Today, RT, which is a Russian-based media outlet, is reporting that Trump shrugs off ceasefire demand. So the German Chancellor Merz have insisted on a ceasefire to be the result of future meetings. So he's instructing the US President Donald Trump, say, listen to me, US President. Why is Trump going to listen to European leaders? They are weak. They are weak. They are flakes. Europe is a vassal of the United States. So they are dependent on America for money for NATO. They are corrupt. They have their bonds and their whatever in America. America does not respect Europe. America respect China. China is a real competitor. Europe is not. Europe, these European leaders are a bunch of losers. Pardon my French. So when they sit down and he treats them with absolute disgust and dismay and disdain, look how he kept them in the room like lambs. He kept them in the room like lamb, like a head of livestock. Just kept them in the room there and instructing them. Listen to them. He's tired of them. He wants them to speak and leave. This is how the US president is treating the European leaders. Europe is supposed to be an ally of the United States. I repeat one more time. Europe is supposed to be an ally of the United States of America. And the US president Donald Trump is treating these Europeans like they are bags of potatoes, like they are bag of sack of cassava, like they're not important, they're livestock. And then you have Russia, which is supposed to be the adversary of the United States, with the president of Russia wanted by the International Criminal Court in quotes, which is another European court that nobody respects, being given red carpet treatment. And Trump is excited and have like mutual respect. And then when Trump looks at Macron, he sees a bomb. He looks at Macron in the eye, he sees a weakling. He sees a bomb. He looks at Ursula von der Leyen and he sees a weakling. Who are these Europeans? They are weak. They are so weak that we don't respect them. And when you're weak, you don't have power, nobody respects you. Again, I go back to behavioralism and the behavioralist approach and how it impacts on institutions and how it impacts on even transaction between nation states. So, U.S. President Donald Trump have shrugged off demands from his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron and the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz that the ceasefire be put in place as a first stage of any lasting solution to the Ukraine conflict. The Russians have always insisted that even if the heaven opens, there will be no ceasefire. They want a lasting and the final solution to the problem. They don't care about the ceasefire. The ceasefire is an attempt by the Europeans again to help Ukraine to regroup because Ukraine right now is struggling logistically. There's a lot of challenges. So even if you have a 2, 3 month ceasefire, What will happen is that they'll have enough time to train them on how to use the F-16 and F-35 or whatever the Europeans provide them, defense systems, train them again and push them back to the front line to continue fighting if they cannot solve the other problem. So a ceasefire the Europeans are looking for is an oxygen. They are looking for social oxygen. They are looking for some political oxygen to try to regroup and re-strategize and reload to continue fighting. And even touting the idea of using that opportunity to train personnel and volunteers from France and from England and send them to the battlefield. The Europeans are not honest negotiators. So is the United States of America. I don't even believe that Trump is playing this game fairly. I think it's a game of deception. Do I trust him? Absolutely not. But the Russians also have their own interest, and they are pursuing their interest vociferously. Again, I go back to the idea of behavioralism and how individuals superimpose themselves on institutions. These institutions are there to the extent that these individuals want them to function or want them to function ideally, if that makes any sense. So, as talks in the White House on Monday, Metz told the leaders of France, Italy, and the UK, Finland, that the US and Ukraine, as well as the head of NATO and the EU, Ursula von der Leyen, that to be honest, we all would like to see a ceasefire, the latest from the next meeting on, adding he can't imagine a trilateral meeting taking place without a ceasefire. The Europeans are struggling and trying so hard to be brought on board. The Europeans are trying so hard to be brought on board, to be brought into the conversation between the United States, Ukraine, and Russia. The Europeans don't want to be left out because this is a game of chess. All of them are also looking for the same thing that America is looking for in Ukraine, rare earth minerals. The United States went, and by the way, the reports are coming out already. People are bold enough. There's this conversation on Tucker Carlson recently with this guy telling a story about American soldiers in Afghanistan and what they did in Afghanistan. They were trafficking and sleeping with young boys and trafficking and taking children and selling them, and mostly were trading in narcotics. This is what they were doing, slipping them in their bags, fly to America and make 100 grand, 200 grand from bringing opium from Afghanistan. This is why they wanted, and if like rank and file officers are doing it and making this money, imagine what was going on at the higher level. These guys had the clearance, basically. They were flying into America without any check. They were flying in with the jets to America without any check. And this is what is happening. Most of these military bases in quote that are all over the world, they're using it mostly for trafficking, particularly for narcotics. The number one trafficker of narcotics in America is not the ordinary average Joe, it's the system. And this is why you can't get rid of it. It is the system, the people in government, and the people within the security agencies that are trafficking this. America is one of the most corrupt countries on earth. And anytime you say this, people don't want to hear it. This is the fact. And we are supposed to be here in Africa, this idea, oh, America, the land of the brave and the land of, milk and honey. No, there's a lot of political, economic, and social problems. Even though it appears from the outside that it is democratic, in quote, it's not. And I'm even against the idea of democracy, this idea of liberal Western style democracy imposed on Africa. If it's good for the Americans, let them do it. I don't have a problem with that. Don't bring it to Africa. The Asians are not interested in this so-called democracy that you have in your countries because what has it brought to Africa? For us in Africa, anytime you talk of democracy, it strikes fear into us because democracy to equates to the bombing of Libya, the sponsoring of different rebel groups in Africa, pumping in money through NGOs to continue to infiltrate our system and support terrorist organizations in Africa, as discovered recently, with these so-called NGOs through USAID. It's a fact. By the way, last year or early this year, the Nigerian army chief, even before this whole idea of, even before Trump came to power, right? So the Nigerian army chief, General Christopher Musa, said that the these NGOs operating in the northeast of Nigeria, they're driving unchecked. They refuse oversight function. They go into the northeast. They bring in food and medicine in quotes and taking it to those areas that those terrorists are, and then smuggle weapons into it. They caught some of them. And again, because of the power that these guys have, particularly from sponsors and backers from abroad, the government is asked to stand down. The government is terrified of these powers in Washington and in European capitals that are funding terrorists in Africa. And he said, look, if we need to stop, go to the root cause of this. Who are these people flying drones and flying aircraft into those areas where the terrorists are and aiding and abetting them and giving them technology? Most of these guys like Ado Haliru, Bello Turuji, and some of these so-called bandits are ignorant. But these guys, they've never been to school before. They've never had like any basic formal education. Some of them were taken to Libya and trained with other terrorist groups and brought into the lecture area. Who is sponsoring them? And all this gold that they are taking from these places they are fighting, what is it for? This is some digression, but this is important for you guys to understand how the international system works. And this is what the Russians are looking at in Ukraine and saying, no, you are not going to use Ukraine as a launching pad for us again. Exactly what you're doing in Afghanistan. What you did in Afghanistan. When the Taliban were in power in Afghanistan, they pushed down the opium trade to barest minimum. Zero. There was close to zero production of opium. They destroyed all the opium field, the poppy crops, because this is what the opiums are made from, poppy crops. In Kandahar, in Lashkargah, in Tata province, in Talokan, across Afghanistan. The Taliban destroyed the opium and America came in and brought it back. The Europeans came in and allowed it to fester. So they were trading it and taking it back to their countries and making thousands of dollars. We're talking of millions of dollars in narcotics, in trafficking of narcotics. It is not the regular average Joe, the Taliban that was trafficking the narcotics to America. It was the soldiers and their commanders and everybody in charge of the corrupt system from top to bottom. And they were selling children after killing their parents. It's the same thing going on in Congo. The fact that you guys are claiming that you know nothing about this is crazy. Because we are the receiving end, the people wearing the shoes are the ones that feel it. So anytime these Europeans and Americans hear of war, they're so obsessed, they love it. CNN will say, Tomahawk cruise missiles. And they show this beautiful picture of the Tomahawk cruise missiles, of the F-16, and they're glorifying war. Narcissism. They're narcissistic psychopaths. They do it at every level. And some of them, even at state level, these are still individuals running it. And this is the mentality. To them, it's Hunger Games. It is war. It's fun, when they see blowing children up and they're testing this weapon and they say the laser system is working perfectly. How can we sell it to these Arab countries? How can we send it to Africa so they can murder each other and so on and so forth? This is the reality we face. So when you guys are surprised that the Russians are also trying to defend their territory, who is expanding to the borders of Russia? It is the United States. I told a story before about the Yinghe incident of 1993. I would say it again. In 1993, Chinese vessel Yinghe en route to the Middle East was stopped on the Indian Ocean by the United States of America. This was under the presidency of Bill Clinton. In 1993, American Special Forces and American Navy accused Yinghe of carrying chemical weapons bound for Iran. They left it stranded on the sea for 23 days, switched off the GPS signal, which is an American satellite system for communication, used also for navigation, which is controlled by the US military. They switched it off and left Yinghe stranded on the high sea on the Indian Ocean for 23 days. And America threatened all the countries around not to provide them with assistance, to allow them to die on the sea. And after 23 days, they finally allowed them, forced them basically to the port of Jeddah in Saudi Arabia and inspected the vessel and they found nothing on it. They found absolutely nothing on the vessel. And what did they do? No restitution, no apology. No compensation whatsoever. In fact, the Clinton government at that time said that, yeah, the Chinese are dishonest people, they deserve whatever they get. Let's not forget the bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. So again, when these Europeans are calling for war, again and again and again, we already know where they stand. And this bald head in in Berlin, this not jobs in London and in Brussels will not send their own children to fight. Zelensky is not sending his children to fight. His wife Olena Zelenskaya is living a lavish lifestyle, traveling and doing shopping in France and in Belgium and buying houses in Florida and have all these yachts and aircraft while they're sending the children of the poor people in Ukraine to go and fight and die for a cause that they claim to believe in. And this is why Zelensky does not want to leave. This guy is sitting on a load of cash and he wants the money to continue to flow. And again, how did we get this to this place in the first place that Russia will have to go and seize territory from Ukraine, which is wrong. You don't just go into somebody's country and bomb them and take land. But again, we need to understand the context. And I'm not justifying it. There's no justification for the bombing of innocent women and children and taking territory from them. Every time there's this adage in Africa that we say that, thank you, Lily. There's this adage in Africa that we say, you see a dead child by the roadside and you see the bicycle. You see the bicycle, the tires of the bicycle that pass by in the morning. So basically, I don't know how to say it in in English, but it rhymes better in my native language if I can speak it. But most of you will not understand. So you see the bike, the wheels on the sand, the wheels of the bicycle, and you see the child, the dead baby on the side of the road. That is all you need to know. Who unalive the baby is clearly that bicycle. But it will rhyme better if I spoke it in my in my native language. But the point I'm making is that there's always the footprint of the West everywhere you go. Basically, yeah, you see the footprint of the bicycle, you see the dead child. That is all you need to know. That tells you the whole story. They always insisted, even when Trump was there during the first tenure, what they were saying from the beginning was that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline must not be allowed to function. The project, Russia must be strangled economically. Russia must not be allowed to succeed. Russia must not be allowed to do this. China must. So again, you're playing into the hands. And this was under the presidency. And fast forward to the presidency of Joe Biden, and Joe Biden, it seems to be everybody's favorite uncle. But at that point, he was very frail and weak and left the government to the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. And Blinken clearly is a Zionist. He is a Zionist. He's a Jewish Zionist, lobbying and did everything for Israel and for his neocon guys that are making a lot of money from, that have ties to the military-industrial complex. So he's an establishment guy. He's a guy from the establishment that understood how the system worked and used it to the best of his ability. And now the guy is going on TV and talking about what they should have done, talking about that he wants to bring an end to this and that. I saw an interview from him recently, talking about solutions to problem. Look at what you guys did in Afghanistan. You were the Secretary of State. This was your baby. Own up to it. People blame they're blaming Kamala Harris because she's a black lady and she's hated by a lot of people, so she's the easiest target, right? The vice president, she has little or no powers. What could she have done? She was the Secretary of State. I mean, she could give her contribution. In most cases, Anthony Blinken and his friends were running the government because Biden was, always, going from one hospital to another. So it was Anthony Blinken that was running the government. And all these extremists in America and in Israel blaming Kamala Harris because they don't like her. She looks too black for them. That's why they don't like her. And when we talk about racism, systemic racism against black and brown people, they say, oh, well, we're not really like that. So the European leaders are in Washington D.C., demanding this and that. And the Trump government is saying, you guys say shit. I'm not going to listen to you. Yeah, then of course he's not going to listen to them. And again, I want to go back to the theory of behavioralism that I told you guys about. So let's look at behavioralism as an approach to politics. Let's look at the concept of behavioralism in politics, of course, even in philosophy. But let's look at the concept of behavioralism in political science, which is, and the reason I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to use it as a point of contact to explain to you um, how the international system works and how municipal politics work, because the individual, if he's charismatic, if he's weak, if he's too dominant, if he's too aggressive, will will have an impact on the system. The institutions do not function as empty spaces. They function with individuals in them that also shape the behavior of these institutions, if you like. So, behavioralism is a significant approach in political science that emphasizes the empirical study of the political behavior through observable actions and scientific methods. So, let's look at the key concept. Behavioralism emerged in the mid 20th century as a response to the traditional political science, which often focused on institutions and normative questions. Instead, behavioralists advocate for analyzing observable behavior of political actors, asserting that political science should be grounded in empirical data and scientific inquiry. The approach seeks to explain and predict political behavior by examining the actions and interactions of individuals and groups. Exactly what I said. It is the actions, it is the interactions between individuals and groups that impose itself on the system. And this is also in contradistinction to the traditional approach of politics, in the sense of um, individuals, um, individuals and groups, not being as important as the institutions. Therefore, you say, oh well, we have the State Department. This is the norm. We do X, Y, Z. But you have individuals that go into the system and they transform the system. And it's important for us to look at it from the scientific approach and understand that the behavior of certain individuals also have an impact on the system itself. And this is why there's a clear distinction between the leadership of Trump, for instance, and the leadership of Biden. So it's about also understanding the individuals. You have a question. What question is it? If you can do that, welcome. No, no, no. I'm actually having a conversation. I'm interacting with the people here. I'm not reading off anything. I wasn't reading anything. I'm not reading anything. Right now I'm broadcasting on two platforms. This is why I'm looking towards this camera and I'm looking towards this camera. What can I say? I mean, why are you gay? You are gay. Okay. Welcome, doctor. All right. Sorry, I had to attend to something real quick. That was a crazy one. Anyways, um, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for participating in this conversation. And if you're just coming across the video, you can like, share, and follow for more. I'll be giving you regular updates on conversations around what is happening on the international stage and what is happening in Africa and around the world. Thank you.